everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to be explaining a chapter that explores a truly fascinating historical phenomenon, which is how the quirky, everyday observations of foreign travelers can actually completely transform our understanding of history. You see, when locals write history, they usually just skip over the mundane details of daily life because, well, they take them for granted. But when an outsider arrives, everything is new, everything is strange, and everything is worth writing down. So, let's dive right into this. Just picture this for a second. Imagine you've just stepped out into a totally alien landscape. What are you going to write home about? Would it be the massive political structures, or would it be, the weird food people are eating? What mundane, everyday things would suddenly seem absolutely fascinating to you, just simply because you've never seen them before?
You know what's crazy? It's simple items, things like the coconut or pecan leaves, that completely answer that question. To the indigenous writers of the time, these were totally routine matters, literally completely unworthy of being written down in a historical text. Yet they absolutely captivated foreign visitors, who had never seen anything like them before. The outsider's eye catches what the local eye just glosses right over, and that gives us a priceless window into the past. To structure our journey through centuries of history today, we're going to look at 5 core areas. First, the outsider's perspective. Second, Al-Biruni, the analytical scholar. Third, Ibn Battuta, the globetrotter. Fourth, Bernier, the critical observer. And finally, uncovering complex realities. Okay, part 1, the outsider's perspective. Seeing the unseen. Let's uncover why the viewpoint of a foreigner is arguably the absolute best tool in a historian's toolkit for revealing exactly what locals missed. This timeline kind of anchors our whole journey today. We're going to be taking this massive sweep from the 11th century with Al-Biruni through the 14th century with Ibn Battuta and all the way into the 17th century with François Bernier. We're talking 3 totally different eras and 3 vastly different cultural backgrounds: Uzbekistan, Morocco, and France, and they all intersect right here in the Indian subcontinent. Moving to part 2, Al-Biruni, the analytical scholar, going from hostage to historian. He actually arrived in Ghazni as a hostage back in 1017. But rather than letting that define him, he developed this incredibly deep fascination with India, spending years mastering Sanskrit and just immersing himself in local traditions, astronomy, and philosophy alongside Brahmana priests. And the thing is, he wasn't just sitting on the sidelines making notes, he was an active intellectual bridge. He used his phenomenal linguistic skills to translate Patanjali's works on grammar into Arabic. But it actually went both ways. To build an environment of real mutual trust with his new Brahmana friends, he translated the works of the Greek mathematician Euclid into Sanskrit. It was a true cross-cultural exchange. Because his brain was so deeply wired for math, his writing took on this almost geometric predictability. He'd typically start a chapter with a really clear question, he'd follow it up with a detailed description based on Sanskritic traditions, and then he'd conclude with a sharp analytical comparison to other cultures. It was precise, structured, and just incredibly scholarly. All right, part 3, Ibn Battuta, the globetrotter and the excitement of the unfamiliar. This 14th century Moroccan globetrotter could not be more different from our strict mathematical Al-Biruni. His famous book, The Rila, is driven by pure, wide-eyed emotion, a relentless thirst for adventure, and this really deep love for the excitement of the unfamiliar. Just listen to the sheer drama in his own words. "I forsook my home as birds forsake their nests." And he was only 22 years old at the time. Unlike other scholars in his class, he firmly believed that the experience you gain through physical travel was way more important than anything you could ever read in a book. So, completely swayed by this overmastering impulse, he set off on a massive overland journey, leaving literally all his loved ones behind. But, it wasn't all just some romantic adventure. Even though he eventually joined this vibrant, cosmopolitan network of scholars, Ibn Battuta was incredibly vulnerable out there. He wrote a lot about the profound loneliness of the road. At one point, he got hit with a fever so terrible, he literally had to tie himself to his saddle with a turban cloth just to stop himself from falling off his horse. He even wrote about arriving in Tunis, knowing absolutely nobody, and just weeping bitterly from sheer crushing homesickness. Yet, through all of that hardship, his curiosity never faded. He meticulously wrote down details that local writers totally ignored. He dedicated whole paragraphs just explaining the mechanics of chewing palm leaves with areca nut and chalk.
But get this, what really blew him away was the state's infrastructure. He documented an imperial postal system that was so unbelievable, so efficient, that a journey from Sind to Delhi that would normally take 50 days allowed state spies to relay reports to the Sultan in just 5 days. 5 days.
Which brings us to part 4, Bernier, the critical observer, a doctor with a difference. Let's fast forward a bit to the 17th century with François Bernier. He was a French doctor, but he looked at the Mughal Empire through a highly critical comparative lens. He wasn't there just to marvel at the sights, he was there to evaluate, and honestly, to harshly judge.
So Bernier looks around and basically paints a picture of absolute doom. He called the Mughal emperor a king of beggars and barbarians. He warned that the towns were ruined and filled with ill air, and claimed the fields were nothing but pestilential marishes. And the root cause for all this misery, according to him? Crown ownership of the land. He explicitly wrote these accounts as a giant red flag to European kings, essentially saying, hey, don't adopt their models of governance, or your kingdoms are going to turn into wastelands too.
And that brings us to part 5, uncovering complex realities, reading between the lines. And honestly, this is where a historian's job gets incredibly fun. We can't just take Bernier at his word, right? We have to learn how to read between the lines. We have to dig up the complex reality that's hidden directly beneath his very heavy, doom-laden bias. This table brilliantly illustrates the whole method. When you weigh Bernier's gloomy, pessimistic claims right up against his own accidental admissions, the actual truth just jumps out at you. He claims artisans have zero incentive and manufacturing is completely declining, but then, in the exact same breath, he marvels at the vast quantities of the world's precious metals flowing into India to buy these supposedly declining manufactured goods. He complains about tyrannical poverty, but accidentally admits that the Kingdom of Bengal surpasses Egypt itself in producing rice, silk, and cotton. By contrasting his bias with what he actually saw, we suddenly uncover a thriving, incredibly complex socioeconomic reality. Take a look at this finely crafted spoon, for example. Even while he was constantly complaining about a lack of progress in tools, Bernier himself was forced to admit that he was completely mesmerized by what he was looking at. He actually wrote that he doubted if the exquisite workmanship of local gold ornaments could be exceeded by any European goldsmith. He regularly praised the absolute beauty, softness, and delicacy of local artisanship, which totally contradicts his own main narrative of a barbaric, declining state. So, as we wrap up this explainer on how the outsider's eye shapes our historical understanding, it leaves us with a really fascinating final thought. Think about it. 1,000 years from now, when future historians look back at how we document our travels today, our travel vlogs, our Instagram stories, our blogs, what are they going to see? What perfectly mundane things are we totally ignoring right now? And more importantly, what hidden biases will they have to uncover in our own stories? Keep that in mind the next time you travel. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey through history.